All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. We are incredibly excited for our program today and also very excited because this is the first time we are hosting a webinar on the Teams platform. So I mention that because we're very excited about the technology and also to ask for your indulgence in advance if we run into any hiccups. But to kick us off, the Teams webinar platform includes a poll function. So I would ask that everyone please answer the poll, which will soon pop up, about what you are hoping to learn from this webinar today. And as you are considering those options, I will introduce myself. My name is Maggie Cassidy, and I am Director of the Preservation Compact. I'm very excited to introduce my colleagues who will also be speaking with you today and to collectively take a deep dive into the world of naturally occurring affordable housing, or as we affectionately call it, NOAA. With generous support from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the DePaul Institute for Housing Studies and the Preservation Compact have undertaken a 2-year research project that we call Breaking Up the NOAA Monolith. Some of you may have attended our October 2nd conference on this behalf. Some of you may have participated and been speakers, and thank you to all. But if you missed it, today is going to be a good substitute because today we are going very deep into the research itself. And we will also hear from our partners at DataMade about the brand new web tool that they designed with our help and their help to showcase this exciting research. So I am going to answer the poll real quick. There we go. And then I'll be able to see the results. Excellent. So we're learning about strategies for NOAA preservation. We're going to see the research, market-specific NOAA preservation approaches. I think some of you saw these questions in advance. This is great. Thank you. So without further ado, I am going to pass the mic to Emily Bloom-Carlin and Jeff Smith to talk with us about the research and data. Emily.
Hey everyone. So like Maggie said, my name is Emily Bloom-Carlin and I'm a senior program officer at the Preservation Compact. Next slide, please, Cassidy. The Compact is a policy collaborative, and for the past 15 years, we've brought together all levels of government, nonprofit and for-profit developers, community-based organizations, lenders, civic groups, advocates, and other stakeholders to focus like a laser on preserving the Chicago region's stock of affordable rental housing, both the big A government subsidized stock and naturally occurring affordable housing. And as a quick note, when we talk about preserving affordable rental housing here today, we don't mean historic preservation. All we mean is keeping buildings in good condition and affordable. And we do that at the Compact by convening stakeholders to intervene directly to save properties that are at risk of loss, and also by developing tools and strategies to facilitate the preservation of affordable housing. And I'm joined here today by Jeff Smith, the Executive Director of the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University. The Institute for Housing Studies, or IHS, is a research center based at DePaul University that provides analysis and data to inform affordable housing policy and practice. And Jeff and I are going to do 3 things today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the genesis of our research project and why we called it Breaking Up the NOAA Monolith. Then Jeff is going to provide an overview of the exciting and novel data analysis he and his team have done. And finally, I'm going to share some detail on the qualitative portion of this project and set the stage for the walkthrough of the web tool. And if we can do all of that in 15 minutes, Maggie's definitely going to give me a gold star. So next slide, please. So why do we care so much about NOAA, and what do we mean when we say that we want to break up the NOAA monolith? Well, first, like Maggie said, NOAA represents a huge part of our affordable rental housing stock in this country, right? We know that subsidy for rental housing is scarce and oversubscribed, and that most renters in need of low-cost housing actually live in market-rate buildings. So as a result, this part of the stock has always been an important part of our work at the Compact and at IHS. And what we know empirically is that the loss of NOAA exacerbates the Chicago region's affordability crisis. And I think one thing that's been really heartening for me, and I can only imagine is even more exciting for folks who have been doing this a lot longer than I have, is that there's a growing consensus on the national level that preserving NOAA is of critical importance to addressing our national affordable housing crisis, right? Not only do we not have enough affordable rental housing for all of the people who need it, but we're also losing what we already have, right? However, even here in Chicago, we know that preserving NOAA is complicated in part because the term NOAA is just shorthand for habitable, low-cost market rate rental units. You can see two different NOAA buildings on the slide here, and you know in sort of instinctively that NOAA is not a monolithic category, right? The size of NOAA buildings, where they're located, who they're owned by, and vitally the ways in which they're being lost varies enormously, right? In some communities, we're losing NOAA when there's upward pressure on rents. And I think this is the preservation challenge that we talk the most about in our country. But in other communities, we're losing NOAA to disinvestment and poor physical conditions, right? And intuitively, given this, there isn't really a silver bullet for preserving NOAA. And what we've learned in Chicago is that we need lots of different strategies, and we need to target them to specific market contexts, right? And a silver lining of having a diversity of preservation challenges here in Chicago is that we've developed a lot of specialized preservation tools over the years to address a variety of different neighborhood conditions, right? And this is the fundamental intuition behind our project. Different communities face different preservation challenges, and Chicago's unique conditions make it sort of a lab for preservation strategies. And vitally, as you'll see through the web tool and in Jeff's presentation, communities across the country have also been developing tools to address their unique challenges, right? The size of the affordable housing challenge in Chicago and in our country means that we can't go it alone, and we need to learn from each other. So as Jeff is going to show you now, we have some exciting new ways to identify opportunities for collaboration and ways to target policies and programs. And so I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on where you might be coming from. So yeah, Emily did a great job of providing an overview of this issue and why we were interested in it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data side of things, but just big picture to get a sense of where this data piece kind of fits into the broader context of our overall project. You know, big picture, the goal of this project was to inform the development of local and national policy supporting the preservation of unsubsidized lower cost rental housing. And there are three kind of interrelated pieces to this work. Part one was to develop a unique data analysis to categorize a set of cities and submarkets based on rental housing market characteristics and highlight the variation in rental housing market conditions across the country. As Emily noted, we really had done a lot of work on this topic in Chicago, but recognized that not every place is Chicago, and we wanted to highlight, using data, the different types of market contexts in cities across the country. Then part two, use these typologies to engage and convene stakeholders from cities representing similar and different rental housing market contexts to learn from their rental housing preservation successes and challenges. And then part three, to create the central resource guide and repository for preservation strategies to document these different strategies, and so that people can access these different tools depending on their interest or their market context. And that's what the website that we're going to talk about later might be. So if you go to the next slide, you know, thinking about the data component of this, you know, we really wanted to build out on our experience working in Chicago, where we see, you know, high cost neighborhoods, lower cost, historically disinvested neighborhoods that kind of fall somewhere in the middle, kind of build off of that work to broaden that analysis nationally. So what we did was develop an analysis that primarily leveraged nationally available data from the U.S. Census, using public use microdata areas as the primary geographic unit of analysis. For those who aren't deeply steeped in census data lingo, those are submarkets that usually represent between 100 and 200,000 population units. So they're big enough to be representative of a large market, although almost too big in some ways to really get too granular in terms of the way that some people look at their local housing market. But for a national analysis, we feel like this was the best unit of analysis to use, largely because of this particular data set that was available. In the analysis, we were able to identify, we used a clustering analysis technique. And if you're really interested in learning more about that, you can go to the website and there's a technical paper there that will give you the details on that analytical approach. But we used, we use that clustering technique to identify 6 different rental housing market typologies based on current conditions and how those conditions have changed over time. And we really tried to bucket the kind of things we were looking at into factors affecting the rental housing supply, factors affecting rental housing demand, and factors affecting rental housing affordability conditions. So if you go to the next slide, which may be difficult to read because the coloring is a bit light, but this is cluster 1, which is representative of communities, submarkets that have a historically disinvested market context, right? So I should, by the way, kind of highlight how to read these maps. There are 2 dimensions here. The one dimension is the kind of translucent bubble, and the size of that bubble is the number of low-income renters in this particular market type in that specific MSA. So that's the number. And then the darker circle represents the share of the MSA's low-income renters that are in that particular market type. So areas that have large, kind of solid circles means a higher share of the area's low-income renters are living in that particular market type, right? So, so you can see here, that this is a market type largely concentrated in the Northeast, the North, kind of Great Lakes states, areas that have, a substantial share of low-income renters living in this market type would be Providence, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Buffalo, and Detroit. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the characteristics of this. They're most frequently found in the urban core of older or more mature metropolitan areas that have higher levels of segregation and histories of disinvestment. On the demand side, you see generally this cluster has a high share of households that are renters. Of those renters, a very high share of those renters are very low income, and you have higher shares of older renters or predominantly Black renter populations compared to other market types. On the supply side, you've got a high share of older rental housing, pre-World War II typically, and a high share of rental units found in 1 to 4 unit buildings. And on the affordability side, you see a high level of lower cost rental units. So it's not necessarily that affordability is the primary challenge here, but the very low incomes of the renter households mean that there is a high level of cost burden despite the relative affordability of those of the housing stock, or the relative low cost of the housing stock. And you in this area also see a generally higher level of subsidy programs. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what we creatively called cluster 2. Which is representative of a kind of a higher cost that many people think of as a traditionally gentrifying market context. And so this is a market type that's most common in the metro areas like San Francisco, San Jose, Boston, Seattle, New York City, Washington, D.C. If you go to the next slide, it's sort of a common market, not common, it's really not a common market type in general, to be honest, but it's most frequently found in the urban cores of more established, economically dynamic, larger metropolitan areas. On the demand side, another area that has a high level of renter households. Recent years, you've seen an increase in the number and the share of renters that are high income and younger, at the same time seeing losses in older and lower income renters. On the supply side, this market type has an older, mid-sized rental housing rental housing stock, but also has seen some recent development in larger, newer buildings. On the affordability side, a low level of affordable housing stock and a declining level of low-cost rental housing. At the same time, you're also seeing a loss of lower income renters, which indicates, kind of displacement pressure happening in these neighborhoods, and an increasing level of exclusivity seen in this particular market type. If you go to the next map, this is what we would call, based on the data, kind of slower developing. They're older inner ring suburbs in many cases, although in some cases they're in the city as opposed to the suburbs. So they're modest density, but they haven't seen a lot of new development. So you have an older housing stock. Areas where you see a lot of this particular market type would be Miami, Los Angeles, San Jose, New York, San Francisco. If you go to the next slide, it's most frequently found in the, sorry, that's the same as the last one. So it's frequently found in the suburbs of larger, more established metropolitan areas. So this slide is not correct, but But so on the demand side, you see a moderate level of renters. You see renters with a kind of a highly diverse by race and ethnicity and by income renter population, but you've seen a recent increase in high income renters. And you see sort of a middle-aged renter population, but a decline in younger renter households. On the supply side, again, it's an older rental housing stock, often found in 2 to 4 unit buildings or 50 plus unit buildings. But I think the defining characteristic of this market type is that it's has limited new construction or new development. So it's a pretty static built environment, even though you have seen increases in low income rent or high income renters. And that dynamic, I think, is leading to rising affordability pressures, increasing levels of cost burden. This area has a limited low cost rental supply, and lower declining levels of low income renters. But the low income renters that remain in the area tend to be increasingly cost burdened. So let's go to the next slide. So this is sort of the kind of inverse of the previous one, where it is also sort of an urban suburban market type, but whereas the previous market type was primarily characterized by a lack of new development, this market type is characterized by more recent new housing development, and so this tends to be found more frequently in the Sun Belt or in areas that have seen a lot of recent growth. So Salt Lake City, Nashville, Portland, Oregon, Sacramento, Houston, and Dallas are areas where this is a particularly common market type. If you go to the next slide, you see that this market type is found in the urban core of growing metro areas or suburban areas of larger, more established metropolitan areas. On the demand side, it's sort of a mix of renters and owners, so it's for moderate levels of renter household, but renters are more likely to be young, have moderate incomes, although we've seen a large drop recently in low-income renters in this particular market type. On the supply side, rental units are newer, so there are not a lot of pre-World War II buildings, a lot of post-war rental housing, and in particular, there's been a higher level of recent development in 50 plus unit rental properties. From an affordability conditions perspective, it's generally affordable, but recent trends point to a deterioration of affordability conditions, particularly seeing large losses in the lower cost rental supply while seeing increases in lower income renters living in higher cost units. And then if you go to the next slide, we're kind of getting into the more suburban market types where you don't necessarily have a lot of renter households, but still, there are renters who live in these areas. This particular market type would be high cost suburbs with very limited rental options. MSAs that have a lot of this particular market type would be Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., Austin, Charlotte, and Atlanta. If you go to the next slide, most frequently found in the suburbs of almost all metropolitan areas. On the demand side, low levels of renting. Renters in this area are more likely to be middle-aged and earn higher incomes and be predominantly white. On the rental supply side, you see a lot of single-family rentals built between 1950 and 2000, although you have seen some recent development of larger 50-plus unit multifamily rental buildings. On the affordability side, low and declining share of affordable rental units, very few low-income renters. This market type has the highest share of low-income renters who are living in higher cost units, an indication that there isn't a lot of affordability in this area, and there aren't many subsidy programs available. So, kind of a rental desert type of market typology. Not a lot of rental housing. The rental housing that exists is pretty expensive and inaccessible to low-income renters. And the next market type would be, again, a similarly very suburban market type where you don't see a high level of renting. Although in this market type, it sort of, because of the geography that we're using here for the PUMA level, in some smaller metro areas, the PUMA kind of might include a mix of different underlying market typologies. So you do see this market type being common in smaller MSAs like Oklahoma City, Birmingham, Pittsburgh, Hartford, and St. Louis. If you go to the next slide, this is typically found in the suburban fringe of most metro areas, but like I said, it can also include central areas of some smaller metros. On the demand side, it has the lowest level of renter households. Renters tend to be older and low moderate income and predominantly white. On the supply side, rentals largely found in single-family homes built between 1950 and 2000, but it also includes a higher level of mobile home rentals compared to most areas. That tends to be generally a small portion, but this area has some higher levels of that type of renter household rental stock, and a very low level of rental units found in larger 50+ unit buildings. And generally, this is, very affordable and stable market type. So, renters tend to have, lower levels of cost burden. So just generally, even though there's not a lot of rental housing in this area as compared to the previous market type, this one is generally affordable. So that's the data and the maps. And I'll hand it back to Emily to talk about how we are applying this to policy.
Thanks, Jeff. And so, the next phase of this project was really driven by the core values that the Compact and IHS established from the outset, right? First, we really didn't want to parachute into communities and tell them about their markets. This has happened to us a lot in Chicago, and we feel really strongly that local folks know their communities way better than we do. So we wanted to share this analysis with practitioners on the ground and frankly, have them tell us if it looked right. And second, we wanted this to be used as a tool to drive intentional strategies and collaboration. So we spent sort of the last year talking to a lot of folks across the country. And next slide, please. And so after nearly a year of interviews and other qualitative research, what did we find? Well, first, this probably won't surprise anyone, but there was widespread agreement from stakeholders that our intuition was right. NOAA is an important part of their local housing ecosystem. Their NOAA stock is facing preservation challenges, and those challenges look different within the different markets that make up their MSA. We also found that while MSAs varied in how far along they were in addressing threats to their local stock, there are a lot of innovative models out there that have the potential to be effective in other similar markets. We also heard from folks that they wanted more, right? When they saw the map and heard about the goals of the project, a really common refrain was, I've been saying someone should do this for a long time. And finally, people want to learn about tried and true strategies. They want things that are tested, and they really want to connect with their peers and other similar MSAs, right? And they asked for help matchmaking. People are busy, and they really don't want to waste time reinventing the wheel, and they want to talk to folks who are already implementing programs that are successful. And so Maggie and Derek will talk a little bit more about this in a second, but this work has resulted in a new repository of NOAA preservation strategies and the creation of a web tool. The web tool is really responsive to all three of those sort of findings from the qualitative portion of our research, right? The web tool highlights the importance of unsubsidized affordable rental housing in communities across the country. It lifts up the high impact strategies that folks are using to preserve NOAA in their communities. And it uses Jeff's data analysis to build connections between markets, really laying the groundwork for a national NOAA preservation community of practice. And before we move on to our next section, I want to shout out my incredible colleague, Cassidy Kramer, who is running things behind the scenes today and who has also worked tirelessly over the past year to translate the sort of quantitative and qualitative analysis into a searchable database of preservation tools that are categorized based on IHS's cluster analysis. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Maggie.
All right, thank you. We're really creating a kind of major cliffhanger here about this web tool. So I hope everyone's getting very excited. I know I am. Just a quick reminder that the Q&A is open in at the top of your screen. We're not going to be doing like verbal questions at the end, but please go ahead and type in any questions that you have. In the event that we're not able to get to your question, we will be very happy to connect with you after this and keep the conversation going. And the recording of this webinar will be available forever, as far as I know. So as a quick break, let's do another one of our fun little polls and hear about our attendees here today and what type of entity you work for. So that's just sort of out of our own curiosity and to help us think about how we can tailor future presentations of this work to folks who are interested. So, as you saw in the previous excellent presentation, this is complicated data. We are bringing in multiple variables to try to paint a picture of just how varied and complex the NOAA landscape in the United States is. And we did need some help to figure out the best way to convey the information in a way that was going to be user-friendly and useful to people forever. And so we connected with DataMade to help us develop a web tool. And we are lucky to have Derek Eder and Hannah Cushman-Garland from DataMade with us here today to debut the product and give us a little bit of a walkthrough. So, Derek, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Maggie. I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. Hi, everybody. I am Derek Eder. I'm a partner at DataMade, which Maggie mentioned. We are a small web and data consultancy based in Chicago. We work with, actually seeing this poll here, quite a few folks in your sectors. We do a lot of work with folks in government. We do a lot of work with nonprofits, and we do a lot of work with academics as well. So, and I think also not listed, but we do a lot of work with journalists. So our mission is really to support those partners on projects pertaining to democracy, justice, and equity. And so when Maggie approached us about working on this project, it really, I think, fit well with what our organization is all about. We're pretty selective about the kinds of work that we do, and preserving affordable housing is definitely like fits into that, that selective process for us. You can just see, this is our website, datamade.us, to see some of the projects that we've worked on. The overall sort of offering that we give to our clients is oftentimes folks are coming at us with a lot of data, or in this case, there's a lot of research. And we oftentimes are tasked with taking that information and making it digestible to a broader group of people. That's usually doing things like data visualization or data analysis. So this is actually not the first time we've taken some of the work that Jeff Smith and the folks at IHS have done and created something that's like built for like sort of mass appeal or mass consumption using their really awesome data and research. So that's us. I think, Hannah, do you want to maybe talk about the website, the Preserve NOAA website, and the methodology we took for it?
Sure, that sounds good. I'm Hannah Cushman-Garland, also a partner at DataMade. And yeah, there were a few things we had needed to bear in mind as we were trying to put together a web tool to allow folks to really dig into this really great research that IHS and the Preservation Compact has done. So kind of the first challenge is that the cluster analysis can be difficult to think about. So we really wanted to try and design the site in a way that facilitated thinking about and using the clusters at the appropriate geographic level. Cluster analysis is kind of useful for thinking about like groupings of things. So like an animal, vegetable, or mineral, even though the details about members of those different groups might be really different. So say we have a group of animals, like you can have a dog and a whale, but we're just going to be talking about the animals, and like the differences between the dog and the whale are not necessarily important. So that was one thing we were bearing in mind. We also wanted to serve a diverse group of practitioners. So to Emily's point, we wanted to bring people together. We wanted to facilitate like the beginnings of this like community of practice. And so we needed to have things for people and from all of the dimensions of that community of practice, so that we could get people to come together. So that is, we wanted to give everyone an entry point. So whether you have a national or a regional/local interest or area of practice, whether you're looking specifically interested in markets that have specific demographic or income characteristics, or if you're looking at particular kinds of housing markets, we have ways for you to come in. And then also kind of trying to bring relevant info in for folks, regardless of what kind of toolkit they have, whether you're a private lender or you are in the government and you can offer a public subsidy or other kind of policy to help with these preservation efforts. We wanted to have content that was relevant for you. Also, in service of this sort of like fostering community, we wanted to highlight existing and exemplary efforts of preservation in different MSAs, and help people find ones that were relevant to their work. So you'll see on the site, we have ways of seeing what programs are happening across MSAs belonging to a particular cluster. And also a way of looking at if you know that, a way of looking at what programs are in place in a particular MSA. So let's say you're focused on Chicago. You can look at the Chicago detail page and see what's already happening there so that maybe you can piggyback or complement the existing efforts in that MSA. And then finally, we really wanted to encourage exploration, as Jeff and Emily talked about with a great deal of articulateness, more than me. This is a very nuanced problem, and there are a lot of nuanced ways to come at it and address it. And so the site, in the same way, the site is kind of nuanced and everything is linked. So that when you're using it, you might come in and find what's relevant to you, but it also allows you to kind of explore other facets of this issue and of the strategies people are using to try and address it. And yeah, Derek, I guess actually I'm starting the tour of the site. So
yeah, but before we do, I want to make sure, does everybody have the URL? I'm on the website right now. It is live. You can go to it. It is preservenoaa.com. Maybe, I don't know, Cassidy or somebody could drop that in the chat or someplace for folks to have access to it. You're invited to, we're unveiling it now, I think, and you are invited to go click around and follow along as we give our tour of the website.
Cool. Are we ready, Derek?
Yeah, let's do it. You want
Great.
you want to show off the homepage first?
Yeah, we'll jump into the homepage. So what you'll find here, what we felt was important first was to kind of introduce people to what the cluster analysis was, what were the primary factors or facets that we were considering. It's because different policies are used in different market types, and it kind of suggests what tools will be the most effective in other MSAs belonging to that cluster. So then we have a quick overview of all of the clusters in the analysis. These are the maps that Jeff shared in his slides, and you can see basically the distribution of renters across these different clusters across these different MSAs. So as Jeff mentioned, there are 2 dimensions on each of these maps. The solid bubble is the share of renters. So if you're interested in, implementing a strategy and you're like, where do I implement this where it's going to have, it's going to impact like the highest share of the market, you're looking for those dots that are quite big. The solid dots, and then the larger translucent dots are the number of renters. This is kind of more of a population map, but if you're looking to impact, highest number, like raw number of people, looking for those big bubbles is useful. You can also toggle between different market segments. So the defaults to showing you low and moderate income renters, as these are the folks that are going to be most exposed to the availability of affordable housing. But you can also look at all renters. And if you're interested, you can also look at moderate and upper income renters. And then at the very bottom, we have a list of all the MSAs represented in the analysis. And similarly to the maps, these values default to showing you the info about low, moderate income renters, but you can also look at all renters or moderate and upper income renters. And basically what this is telling you is what proportion of the selected renter group lives in each MSA in each cluster in each MSA in the analysis. So you've noticed both the small multiple maps of the country showing the distribution of renters in these various clusters across MSAs, and this list of MSAs are linked. So you can use these things to say, click into an MSA detail or click into a cluster detail page, and then navigate around between them. So Derek, do you actually want to pull up the cluster detail page and we can go into that as well?
Sure, let's do it.
So on this cluster detail page, you're going to see this is the same map, just bigger from the homepage, so you can really dig in. You can also zoom in. So if you're interested in just looking at a particular region or a particular MSA, you can zoom in there. And then below this, it has a kind of description of what it characterizes pumas within this cluster. So you have ranger concentration, where they're most frequently found, the key affordability challenges, winter demographics, the housing stock characteristics, and then development patterns. And then this page also lets you get a lot further detail about the clusters themselves. So you have not just kind of those bite-sized like attributes, but also a really nice kind of prose examination of what characterizes pumas in this cluster. I think this is going to be closer to kind of the explanations that Jeff went through for each cluster in his slides. And then below that, as I mentioned, we wanted to have a way to kind of connect similar programs across MSAs. And so here you'll find programs that are active in MSAs that have this particular cluster. So you can see like there are, right off the top, there's DC, St. Paul, and Philadelphia. They all have different kind of programs addressing issues in this first cluster, but they might not know about each other until they're able to see this resource. So this is available on each of the cluster pages. And then at the very bottom, similarly to the homepage, you have that list of MSAs, but it is filtered and sorted. So this is a list of MSAs that have pumas belonging to cluster 1, and then you can see it's ordered in descending order of share. So the one at the MSAs at the top is like the highest proportion of low moderate income renters lives in cluster 1, and on down. Yeah, but I think Derek, after I could kick it over to you to talk about the MSA pages and programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Hannah mentioned, and this is a philosophy we like to follow with all of our projects, is everything is linked. So you'll never run into a dead end. You'll be able to like jump off, and if there's a particular path you're following, you can sort of click through and you can arrive at different pages from sort of different entry points, knowing that folks are coming at this from different perspectives. So you might be really thinking locally focused, start with the city that you're in or that you work mostly in, and then you can jump into different clusters from that or the programs from that. Likewise, if you're nationally focused, you can kind of look at it from the high level maps that we have, and you can dive into it from that way. So the idea is there's not just one path to follow on the website to find these different resources. You can really sort of pick the one that makes the most sense for you. So yeah, you can dive into each of these particular MSAs. I believe we have the top 50 by population in the United States. Each one of them has a detail page which has a map. Actually, Hannah, do you want to speak just briefly about like this map and what the dots density in this map means for folks?
Sure. So these are dot density maps, which means that each dot in the particular puma represents 1,000 renters. And what it's meant to show you is kind of the concentration of the renter population in each puma and in each MSA. So you can see we've got, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen pumas here. And of those, the background color is the cluster that they belong to. And then the dots each represent 1,000 renters living within that puma. So within that cluster. Hopefully that makes sense, but basically it's supposed to show you like the distribution of where the renters are living.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes, it's always a challenge when you map things, especially geographies that are not equal size. Geography is not the same as like people. Like oftentimes people make that misconception when they see, like an entire shaded area like colored in a certain color. that's land area. That's not exactly people. And so these dots help show where actually the people are, in addition to sort of maintaining that geography. So we have these maps for each MSA, and then we also have sort of a miniature version of the list of clusters that are present in this particular MSA. So again, you're really like invited to dive into each of these different pages, MSAs. Hopefully finding maybe you might be surprised. Some cities may have similarities in ways you didn't expect. I think that is one of the really exciting things about the work that Jeff and his team at the DePaul Institute for Housing Studies did is took this information and sort of put it in a new context that allows you to really sort of maybe find connections that you maybe didn't know were there otherwise, using sort of underlying data. The last piece I want to show, which Hannah mentioned, is the programs itself. This is really, I think, especially according to that poll that was answered in the beginning, seems like these are the things you all are interested in, is the strategies for preserving NOAA. And this is our program database that the folks at Preservation Compact put together. I think Cassidy, again, giving a shout out to her for the person I believe who is sort of instrumental in putting this all into sort of one database. You can see all of the programs that exist, and through this programs page, you can filter again you can do it by market condition, you can do it by cluster, you can do it by city. And so, for example, if I wanted to find the programs that are active in Chicago, I can search for that, and you can see these two programs we have listed, and then which clusters they apply to. Each one of these has a detail page, which has a lot of really excellent information that was researched so that you can kind of get a sense of not just what the program is and links to the different resources for it, but also things like where it's active, what kind of geography it affects, the kinds of entities that are involved, the category of renters, different other kinds of tool categories, when it was started, what kinds of buildings it impacts, what kinds of tenants are targeted, what kinds of affordability restrictions, funding, and funding sources. So this is a database that I know that Preservation Compact is planning to continue to maintain. I think one of the goals of this project is to also find more. I think they did a ton of work to research the ones that already exist, but no database is ever fully complete. So this will be updated. And in fact, we just pulled in the latest data as of a week ago. And the plan is for this to be kind of updated as new information becomes available. I think that's it for the tour of the website, unless maybe, Maggie, did I miss anything you want us to go over?
I don't think so. I think this is really great, and people have now preservenoaa.com, the URL, and can explore on their own time. And I did see that Rupa in the question and answer had a great point about if there's something missing, can it be added? Absolutely. Derek is very supportive to say that it's a list of all the programs that exist at the top of his remarks. But the truth is that as we are here to connect practitioners, to educate people about what might be happening in other places. And part of that is also educating ourselves. So if there are programs that you think should be on here that aren't, thank you, and let me know ASAP. So we will get to that. Thank you, guys. This is so great. There is so much richness in the research, in the web tool, and in this community. So we really appreciate it. Hannah, before I let you go backstage again, we got a question about the dot density maps. Can you see it on your end, or should I read it? I'll read it just in case there's anyone who's like just on the phone or something. Are the dots used for the dot density maps distributed according to population, e.g. block level, within each PUMA, so they're vaguely representative of where residents are concentrated?
No, so for this analysis, since we wanted to keep people from going too granular, since this was done at like the PUMA level, at the smallest level, they're randomly distributed within the PUMA that the resident lives in, rather than being faithful to a finer resolution.
Okay, that is great. Thank you for the clarification. And then we also got another, I think, really complimentary question that I'm going to send to Jeff. So let's leave the map up so that we can all admire it. But I'm going to ask Jeff to join me back here in the main room to answer Dylan's question. What kind of local level research or data could enhance this analysis? How could Chicago level data on property ownership and building conditions affect the analysis of the NOAA disappearance in Chicago?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that one of the trying to think of the right term here, but I think one of our overarching goals for this project was to try to not drill down too locally. I think we're well aware that this map that you're looking at right now of Chicago it paints the Chicago area rental market with a fairly broad brush, and that if you were to dig into any one of those submarkets, you would find a lot of variation. And so we wanted to use this tool as a way to connect folks from other parts of the country and highlight the variation in underlying rental market conditions that might be relevant to preserving, unsubsidized low-cost rental housing. And then as a jumping off point to that, engage locally with your partners on the ground who might have, data to help dig into some of these questions on a more granular basis. So in Chicago, that partner would be us, would be IHS, or would be other groups who are doing other work on the ground to highlight, property ownership or turnover in unsubsidized rental housing stock, or looking at investor buyers, or lots of different potential questions that we could dig into to further understand what's happening on the ground and what kind of strategies might be effective at addressing those challenges. And in lots of the cities that are on this map, there are similar partners to IHS, and I would reference folks to the group that we're a member of, the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership, NNIP. There are a lot of NNIP partners in cities across the country who do similar type of very local work that, if you have additional questions that might require specific granularity in your metro areas, then engaging with those groups to see what data might be available and collaborating with them on additional data questions would be, I think, a great next step.
All right, thanks, Jeff. That's great. Emily, can I invite Emily back into the room? I have a question. This one's coming from me. Would you be so kind as to talk with us about one of your favorite policies and programs and how it relates back to this research?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite, certainly. I think there's some really great policies and programs that were highlighted in the longer half-day sort of convening and summit that we put together earlier this year. There are recordings of the panels and presentations from that summit on the Preserve NOAA web tool website. If you weren't able to make it on that day, there's some really great conversations about highly impactful tools from around the country, from some of our close partners. I think, one model that I think we've talked about a lot internally here at the Compact, beyond the sort of conventional sort of Chicago models that we work with the most, is the LROC program in Los Angeles. This is a really wonderful collaboration between enterprise community partners, the City of Los Angeles, and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative that is bringing together groups of owners of very, very small rental properties, so sort of 1 to 6 unit properties, to ensure that they have the resources that they need to preserve their properties over the long run, and to sort of engage in conversations with the owners in these neighborhoods that are sort of facing historic disinvestment, but over the years have seen sort of upward pressure on costs and values. I could talk through probably a bunch more, but I think that's one of my favorites. One that wasn't discussed at the summit is Boston's Acquisition Opportunity Program. I think it's a really important example of a model that's highly targeted to a specific market context, right? So that program is a fast acquisition fund that helps mission-driven and preservation-minded developers compete on acquisitions of naturally occurring affordable properties. So at the time of sale, that sort of enables mission-driven buyers to compete with well-capitalized investors. That's really targeted to high-cost gentrifying markets, and this is a really great example of a very targeted program. So lots of great programs. Read more about all of them on the website.
Excellent, thank you. We've gotten some more really helpful and collaborative feedback, which we appreciate. And I want to thank everybody for their time today. We are extremely reachable, preservenoah.com, preservenoah.com. If you think of something later that you would like us to be aware of, or if you have another question, we look forward to publishing this recording. Also, thank you, Emily, noting the recording of the October event. But I think I will let everybody return to their Wednesday already in progress. And we certainly look forward to being back with you in a space like this or in real life soon enough. Thanks all.